When your heart feels shattered into 1,000 pieces, when every door seems locked tight against you, when the weight of impossible circumstances presses down like a stone upon your chest, there walks among us a saint who understands. His name carries the whispered hopes of millions, St. Anthony of Padua, the miracle worker who never abandoned those the world had forgotten. Right here, right at this moment, you're about to discover something that could change everything. But first, if this message is already stirring something deep within your soul, show me by hitting that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear these words. And subscribe, because what we're about to experience together is just the beginning of miracles waiting to unfold in your life. Tonight, in the quiet of your struggling heart, we gather not as strangers, but as souls who have tasted the bitter cup of desperation. Some of you watching have been carrying burdens so heavy that sleep has become a distant memory. Others have prayed until your knees wore grooves in the floor, yet silence seemed to be heaven's only response. But here's what I need you to understand, and this might shock you. St. Anthony didn't become the patron of lost causes because he lived a perfect life. He became our intercessor precisely because he knew what it meant to lose everything that mattered. Picture this: a young man named Fernando, born into privilege in Lisbon, watching his comfortable world crumble when he chose to follow Christ. He lost his family's approval, his social standing, his security. Everything familiar vanished like morning mist. Does this sound like your story? Here's where it gets interesting. When Fernando became Anthony, when he joined the Franciscans, he thought his troubles were over. Instead, he found himself shipwrecked, literally thrown by stormy seas onto foreign shores, his mission plans destroyed, his health broken. Stop for a moment. How many times have you felt shipwrecked? Cast up on shores you never intended to reach, your carefully laid plans scattered like driftwood. Anthony spent years in obscurity, years where his gifts remained hidden, where he served in kitchens and swept monastery floors, while his brilliant mind and burning heart seemed wasted. The man who would become one of history's greatest preachers was silent for so long that his brothers thought he was simple-minded. But here's the miracle that changes everything, and this is crucial for your situation right now. One ordinary day, when circumstances forced Anthony to speak publicly for the first time, something extraordinary happened. Words poured from his lips with such power that hardened criminals wept, that sophisticated scholars fell to their knees, that the very fish in the river came to listen when human audiences turned away. What transformed this broken, forgotten man into a vessel of divine power? The same thing that can transform your impossible situation tonight. Anthony learned that God's greatest miracles happen not despite our brokenness, but because of it. Not around our failures, but through them. Are you still with me? Because what I'm about to share will sound impossible until you try it yourself. Throughout history, people facing their darkest hours have turned to St. Anthony and witnessed miracles that defy explanation. Not just lost objects returned, though he helps with those too, but lost marriages restored, lost children found, lost jobs recovered, lost health renewed, lost faith rekindled. But here's what most people miss, and this could be the key to unlocking your breakthrough. Anthony doesn't just find lost things. He reveals what was never actually lost in the first place. That person you think is gone forever, they're not lost to God. That opportunity you believe has vanished, it exists in dimensions beyond your current vision. That hope you think died, it's sleeping, waiting for the rye. Let me ask you something, and please, drop your answer in the comments. What have you lost that you think is impossible to recover? Because someone reading your words might be facing the exact same battle, and your courage to share could be the lifeline they desperately need. St. Anthony's power comes from a secret most people overlook. In life, he became known for his incredible memory. He could recite entire books word for word. But his true gift wasn't remembering information. His gift was remembering God's promises when everyone else forgot them. When plague devastated cities, Anthony remembered God's promise of healing. When divisions tore communities apart, he remembered God's promise of unity. When powerful oppressors crushed the poor, he remembered God's promise of justice. What promise of God have you forgotten in your pain? Here's where Anthony's story becomes your story. Because right now, as you listen to these words, you're positioned for the same kind of miraculous intervention that marked Anthony's life. But first, let me tell you about Maria. Maria had been trying to conceive for 7 years. 7 years of monthly disappointments, failed treatments, mounting medical bills, and a marriage strained to its breaking point. Her husband had started working late more often. Their conversations had become limited to logistics and bills. The joy had drained from their home like water from a broken vessel. One desperate night, Maria found herself on her knees before a statue of St. Anthony in a small chapel. She didn't speak eloquent words or recite memorized prayers. She simply wept and whispered, "Anthony, I can't carry this anymore. Help me find what I've lost." 3 months later, she held positive pregnancy test. But here's the miracle within the miracle. The night she prayed to St. Anthony, her husband had been walking the streets, ready to ask for separation. Instead, he found himself at the same chapel, kneeling beside his wife, neither knowing the other was there until they opened their eyes. Now you might think this is just coincidence. You might rationalize away the miracle. But Maria and her husband, they know better. They're holding their twin daughters right now, 6 years later, and they still light candles for St. Anthony every Tuesday. But Anthony's interventions aren't always dramatic. Sometimes they're whispers so gentle you might miss them if you're not listening with your heart. Remember David? He lost his job after 15 years with the same company. Budget cuts, they said, nothing personal. But at 53, with a mortgage and kids approaching college, David felt invisible in a job market that seemed designed for younger workers. Months passed. Savings dwindled. Hope flickered like a candle in wind. David started doubting everything: his skills, his worth, even his faith. One evening, cleaning out old boxes, David found a prayer card to St. Anthony that his grandmother had tucked into his high school graduation gift years before. He'd forgotten it existed. But there it was, appearing exactly when he needed it most. David didn't ask for a specific job. He asked St. Anthony to help him find his purpose, the thing he'd lost along the way while climbing career ladders and meeting other people's expectations. The answer came through David's 12-year-old daughter. She mentioned that her friend's grandfather needed someone to help with his small construction business. Not glamorous, not his previous salary. But something stirred in David's chest when he heard it. That small construction business specialized in building homes for low-income families. David's corporate skills transformed their operations. Within 2 years, they'd helped 3 times as many families. David had found more than a job. He'd rediscovered his calling. Do you see the pattern? Are you starting to understand how St. Anthony works? If you're feeling stirred by these stories, if something deep inside is awakening, take a moment to like this video and share it. Someone in your circle needs to hear exactly what you're hearing right now. Anthony doesn't just restore what was lost. He often replaces it with something far better than what we originally had. But here's what you need to know about approaching St. Anthony with your lost causes. Timing matters, but not in the way you might think. People often wait until they've exhausted every human possibility before turning to saints for help. They come to Anthony as a last resort, desperate and defeated. And Anthony responds to that desperation with love. But there's a better way. Come to Anthony first. Before the situation becomes impossible. Before your heart hardens with disappointment. Before you lose the capacity to recognize miracles when they appear. This doesn't mean abandoning practical action. Anthony inspires practical action. But it means inviting divine intervention into your efforts from the beginning, not just when those efforts fail. Let me share something that might challenge your thinking about prayer itself. Most people approach St. Anthony like he's a cosmic lost and found department. They present their requests like filing reports. I lost X on Y date at Z location. Please return. Specific, detailed, practical. And sometimes Anthony responds exactly that way. Objects appear in impossible places. Documents turn up just when needed. People reconnect against all odds. But Anthony's deepest work happens differently. Anthony helps you find things you didn't even know you'd lost. Catherine thought she was asking Anthony to help her find a new apartment in an impossible housing market. What she found instead was forgiveness for her estranged sister. The apartment came too, through her sister's unexpected offer to share her home. But the reconciliation was the real miracle. James prayed for Anthony's help in recovering from bankruptcy. He expected financial restoration. What he found was freedom from the fear and shame that had controlled him for years. The money situation gradually improved, but the internal healing changed everything. Susan asked Anthony to help her find her runaway teenager. Her daughter came home, but the real miracle was Susan discovering the parenting wisdom she thought she'd never possessed. So when you approach St. Anthony tonight, consider this. What if the thing you think you need restored is pointing towards something even more important that you've lost? What if your lost job is really about finding your true vocation? What if your lost relationship is about discovering authentic love? Perhaps with that person, perhaps with someone else, perhaps most importantly with yourself. What if your lost health is about finding a life worth living for the right reasons? What if your lost security is about finding unshakable faith? Drop a comment below and tell me, what do you think you might have lost that's even deeper than what you're asking to find? Because recognizing this might be the key that unlocks everything. The truth about St. Anthony that most people never discover is this. He was called the Hammer of Heretics, not because he attacked people, but because he shattered false ideas that kept people trapped. The heresy Anthony fought most fiercely was the lie that some situations are truly hopeless, that some people are beyond help, that some mistakes are unforgivable, that some losses are permanent. Anthony wielded truth like a hammer against these deceptions, and the walls of impossibility crumbled. This is why desperate people throughout 8 centuries have found hope through Anthony's intercession, not because he performs magic, but because he reveals reality. The reality that God's love is bigger than any human loss, any earthly failure, any temporal tragedy. But here's where Anthony's intervention becomes intensely personal for you right now. Anthony doesn't just challenge general lies about hopelessness. He addresses the specific lie you've been believing about your particular situation. What lie have you accepted as truth? That it's too late? That you've tried everything? That you don't deserve rescue? That God doesn't care about your small problems when the world faces such massive ones? Listen carefully to your heart as I speak these words, because Anthony might be challenging your specific deception right now. It's too late. Anthony restored a young man to life after he'd been dead for hours. Time doesn't limit divine intervention. I've tried everything. Anthony found solutions that had never been attempted because they came from beyond human wisdom. I don't deserve rescue. Anthony worked specifically among people society had discarded: the poor, the oppressed, the forgotten. Unworthiness was his specialty. God doesn't care about small problems. Anthony became famous for finding lost needles and kitchen utensils. No concern is too minor for divine attention. Which lie has been whispering in your ear? Because identifying it might be the first step toward your liberation. Now, let me tell you something about Anthony's prayer life that could revolutionize your approach to impossible situations. Anthony didn't just pray for people, he prayed with them. He entered their struggles so completely that their pain became his pain, their hope became his hope. When Anthony prayed for a grieving mother, he felt her loss as if the child had been his own. When he interceded for a man facing financial ruin, he carried that anxiety in his own chest. When he sought healing for the sick, he bore their weakness in his body. This complete empathy, this willingness to carry others' burdens, gave Anthony's prayers unprecedented power. He didn't petition God from a distance. He stood inside human suffering and cried out from there. And here's the miracle that changes everything for you. Anthony continues this same intercession today. When you bring your lost cause to him, he doesn't observe your struggle from heaven's comfort. He enters your pain and prays from within it. You're not asking a distant saint for help. You're inviting a brother to stand beside you in your darkest valley and add his voice to yours as you call upon divine mercy. This is why people report feeling less alone the moment they begin praying to St. Anthony. Not because their circumstances immediately change, but because their burden suddenly feels shared. If you're feeling that sense of companionship right now, if something inside you feels less isolated than when you started watching this video, pause and hit that like button. This is Anthony's first gift to you, the reminder that you don't carry your struggles alone. Now here's something crucial about the way Anthony responds to our desperate prayers. Anthony rarely gives you exactly what you ask for in exactly the way you envision it. This frustrates some people. They think Anthony isn't listening or doesn't care. But Anthony always gives you exactly what you need in the way that will help you most. This requires trust. This requires surrendering your attachment to specific outcomes while maintaining unshakable faith in divine love. Let me illustrate with Roberto's story. Roberto owned a small restaurant that had been his family's pride for 3 generations. When the pandemic forced closures, Roberto lost everything. The building, the equipment, the recipes that had fed the neighborhood for 60 years, all gone. Roberto prayed desperately for St. Anthony to restore his restaurant. He had specific visions: finding investors, negotiating with the bank, rebuilding exactly what had been lost. Months passed. No investors appeared. The bank remained unmoved. The building was sold to developers. Roberto felt abandoned. His faith wavered. He wondered if Anthony only helped with small problems. Lost keys and missing pets. Not devastation this complete. But then Roberto's nephew called from another city. A community center there needed someone to teach cooking classes for at-risk youth. The pay was minimal. The setting was nothing like Roberto's elegant restaurant. Roberto almost declined. This wasn't what he'd prayed for. This wasn't restoration. It was charity. But something, call it Anthony's gentle nudge, made Roberto visit the center. He met kids who'd never learned to cook for themselves, teenagers aging out of foster care with no family recipes, young people who desperately needed not just cooking skills, but the love that comes through sharing food. Roberto discovered something he'd never known he'd lost: the joy of cooking. In his restaurant, food had become business. With these kids, it became love again. 3 years later, Roberto runs 5 cooking programs across the city. His students include former gang members who found purpose in culinary arts, single mothers learning to feed their families on tight budgets, elderly people sharing memories through traditional dishes. Roberto will tell you now, Anthony didn't restore his restaurant. Anthony restored something far more valuable: Roberto's understanding of why cooking mattered in the first place. Are you beginning to see how Anthony works? How he excavates deeper treasures from the rubble of surface losses? Take a moment and ask yourself, what if Anthony restored something even better than what you originally lost? What would that look like? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your vision might inspire someone else's faith. But I need to be honest with you about something that creates confusion for many people seeking Anthony's help. Sometimes Anthony's response seems delayed. Not because he's not listening, not because he doesn't care, but because the timing isn't right yet. Divine intervention operates on eternal time, not human urgency. What feels like delay to us often represents perfect timing from heaven's perspective. Think about pregnancy. 9 months can feel like eternity when you're eager to hold your child. But that waiting period isn't empty time. It's preparation time. Essential development happens in the hidden months that makes birth possible. Your lost cause might be in its preparation period right now. Things are happening beyond your awareness that will make restoration not just possible, but perfect. Lisa learned this truth through heartbreak that seemed endless. Lisa's son, Michael, struggled with addiction for 12 years. 12 years of treatment programs, relapses, midnight phone calls from jail, promises broken, trust shattered, hope deferred until it felt like a cruel joke. Lisa prayed to St. Anthony continuously. She lit candles, attended novenas, made pilgrimages. She begged Anthony to bring Michael home clean and sober. Year after year, Michael seemed to get worse instead of better. Lisa watched other parents celebrate their children's recovery, while her prayers seemed to echo in emptiness. Lisa began to wonder if some children were simply beyond saving, if some mothers were destined to bury their sons, if some prayers were meant to remain unanswered. But in year 13, something shifted. Michael called from a treatment center, but this time was different. His voice carried something Lisa hadn't heard in over a decade: genuine remorse, not manipulation, not desperation for money, real recognition of the pain he'd caused. This treatment program succeeded where 12 others had failed. Michael celebrated 5 years of sobriety last month. He's married now, working as a counselor, helping other addicts find recovery. But here's what Lisa discovered that transformed her understanding of Anthony's timing. During those 12 years of apparent silence, Anthony was working on Lisa too. The mother who sent Michael to his first treatment program was controlling, anxious, trying to manage his recovery through force of will. She loved deeply, but possessed desperately. The mother who welcomed Michael home from his final treatment was different. She'd learned to love without attachment, to hope without controlling outcomes, to pray without demanding specific results. Michael needed to find his bottom before he could build genuine recovery. But Lisa needed to find her surrender before she could offer the kind of love that wouldn't sabotage his healing. Anthony's apparent delay was actually perfect preparation, preparing both mother and son for a reunion that could last. How might Anthony be preparing you during this season of waiting? What internal work might be happening while you wait for external change? Before we go deeper into Anthony's most powerful prayer methods, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and hit the notification bell. The testimonies and teachings we share here could be exactly what you need to hear when your faith feels weak. Now, let me teach you something about St. Anthony that could revolutionize your prayer life forever. Anthony possessed what theologians call bilocation, the miraculous ability to be present in two places simultaneously. Multiple witnesses testified to seeing Anthony preaching in one city, while simultaneously appearing to help someone in crisis hundreds of miles away. But Anthony's bilocation reveals something profound about how saints continue their ministry after death. Anthony isn't limited by physical location or linear time. He can be fully present to you in your crisis, while simultaneously helping countless others around the world. This means when you pray to St. Anthony, you're not competing for his attention with millions of other desperate people. You're not taking a number and waiting in line. Anthony can be completely present to your specific situation with the same intensity he'd give if yours were the only request he'd ever received. But here's the key to accessing Anthony's full attention: authenticity. Anthony responds most powerfully to prayers that come from complete honesty. Not perfect words or theological correctness, but raw truth about where you actually are and what you actually feel. Don't clean up your emotions before approaching Anthony. Don't try to sound holy or spiritually mature. Don't edit out your anger, your doubt, your frustration, your fear. Anthony lived with real people facing real problems. He knows human nature intimately. Pretending to be someone you're not doesn't honor him. It blocks his ability to help the person you actually are. When you approach Anthony tonight, tell him exactly what you're feeling. If you're angry with God, say so. If you're tired of hoping, admit it. If you're scared you don't deserve help, confess it. Anthony can't heal what you won't reveal. But once you open your heart completely, his intercession becomes incredibly specific and personal. Here's a truth that might shock you about St. Anthony's miracles. They often begin with what looks like failure. Anthony's most famous miracle, preaching to the fish, happened because humans had rejected his message. He'd been scheduled to preach in the town square, but hostile crowds prevented him from speaking. Frustrated and seemingly defeated, Anthony walked to the riverbank and began preaching to the fish instead. That's when the miracle erupted. Fish gathered to listen, their heads above water in rapt attention. Word spread. Crowds came running. The very people who'd rejected Anthony's message 20 minutes earlier now hung on his every word. But notice this. The miracle came through failure, not despite it. Anthony's rejection by the crowds created the exact conditions necessary for a greater breakthrough. Your current failure, your recent rejection, your apparent defeat. What if these aren't obstacles to your miracle? What if they're creating the perfect conditions for Anthony's intervention? Sometimes Anthony allows situations to reach their absolute lowest point, because that's where human pride finally breaks and divine possibility finally enters. Maria Elena discovered this principle during the darkest period of her life. Maria Elena had built a successful accounting practice over 15 years. She employed 12 people, served over 300 clients, owned her building, drove luxury cars, took expensive vacations. Success by every external measure. Then her business partner embezzled nearly everything. Clients fled. Employees lost their jobs. Maria Elena faced bankruptcy, lawsuits, and professional disgrace. At 45, she moved back into her elderly mother's spare bedroom. The shame felt unbearable. Maria Elena had been the family success story, the one who'd escaped poverty through education and determination. Now she was dependent on her mother's social security check for basic survival. Maria Elena prayed desperately for St. Anthony to restore her business, her reputation, her independence. She promised donations she couldn't afford, committed to devotions that felt hollow, bargained with heaven for a return to her former life. Nothing happened. Months passed. The bankruptcy proceeded. Former clients avoided her at the grocery store. Professional colleagues stopped returning her calls. Maria Elena hit bottom, and there she found something unexpected. Peace, not happiness, not optimism, but a deep stillness she'd never experienced during her successful years. For the first time in decades, Maria Elena stopped running from one client meeting to the next, one crisis to another, one achievement toward the next. In that stillness, she began to hear things she'd been too busy to notice. Her mother's stories about their family's history, the needs of neighbors she'd never had time to know, her own heartbeat, which had been racing with anxiety for so many years she'd forgotten what calm felt like. Maria Elena started keeping books for her mother's church, volunteer work that paid nothing but felt deeply satisfying. She began offering free tax preparation for elderly parishioners who couldn't afford professional services. Word spread quietly through the Spanish-speaking community. Maria Elena's gentle manner, her patient explanations, her genuine care for people's financial well-being, these qualities had been buried under corporate ambition during her successful years, but blossomed in simplicity. Today, Maria Elena runs a small practice focused entirely on serving low-income families. She'll never be wealthy again, but she's never been more fulfilled. Her mother's spare bedroom became her office, and their home radiates warmth that her previous professional suite never possessed. Maria Elena will tell you, Anthony didn't restore her old life. He revealed her true life, which had been lost beneath layers of worldly success. What might St. Anthony want to reveal about your true life once the false securities are stripped away? Comment below with your thoughts. Sometimes the insights that emerge when we lose everything are the very truths Anthony has been trying to help us find for years. Now I want to share something about St. Anthony that could transform how you understand divine intervention itself. Anthony performed what we call impossible miracles, but he never violated natural law. Instead, he revealed higher laws that transcend our limited understanding of how reality works. When Anthony restored life to the dead, he didn't break the laws of biology. He accessed spiritual principles that supersede physical limitations. When he multiplied food for the hungry, he tapped into abundance that exists beyond material scarcity. When he appeared in two places simultaneously, he demonstrated that consciousness isn't confined by spatial boundaries. This means when you ask Anthony for help with your impossible situation, you're not asking him to break reality. You're asking him to reveal deeper levels of reality that make your restoration not just possible but natural. Your lost relationship can be healed because love is stronger than hurt. Your failed business can be reborn because creativity is more powerful than limitation. Your broken health can be renewed because life force is deeper than disease. Your shattered hope can be restored because divine possibility is larger than human circumstance. Anthony doesn't perform magic tricks. Anthony reveals miracles that were always available once we align with higher truth. But here's what blocks most people from experiencing Anthony's miraculous intervention: attachment to specific outcomes. You pray for your ex-husband to return, but Anthony might have a different man in mind, one who'll love you more authentically. You pray for your old job back, but Anthony might be orchestrating a career change that leads to greater fulfillment. You pray for physical healing, but Anthony might be working on emotional restoration that transforms your entire life experience. Attachment to specific outcomes limits Anthony's options for helping you. But surrender to divine wisdom unleashes his full creative power on your behalf. This doesn't mean becoming passive or stopping practical efforts. It means holding your desires lightly while trusting Anthony's intercession completely. Let me tell you about Carmen's surrender that unlocked a miracle she never could have imagined. Carmen's daughter Sophia had been missing for 3 years, not dead. They'd found no body, not kidnapped, no ransom demands, simply vanished one evening after an argument about Sophia's destructive lifestyle choices. Carmen spent her life savings hiring private investigators. She plastered missing person flyers across 3 states. She appeared on television programs, begging for information. She haunted police stations, demanding updates on cold cases. Every lead evaporated, every hope shattered, every prayer for Sophia's return seemed to echo in cosmic silence. After 3 years, Carmen was broken financially, emotionally, and spiritually. She'd lost her job due to missed work while chasing false leads. Her marriage had crumbled under the strain. Her health had deteriorated from stress and sleepless nights. One desperate evening, Carmen knelt before her statue of St. Anthony and spoke words that surprised even her. "Anthony, I surrender Sophia completely to you. I release my demand that she come home. I release my need to know where she is. I release my attachment to being her rescuer. I trust you to care for her better than I ever could. Just help me find peace." That surrender prayer marked the end of Carmen's frantic searching and the beginning of her healing. She started therapy. She rebuilt her relationship with her husband. She found a new job. She began helping other parents of missing children, not by finding their children, but by offering them emotional support during their searches. Carmen never stopped loving Sophia or hoping for reunion, but she stopped organizing her entire existence around that hope. She learned to live fully, even while missing someone completely. 18 months after that surrender prayer, Sophia called. She'd been living in a different state, working under a different name, slowly recovering from drug addiction and abusive relationships. She'd wanted to come home countless times but felt too ashamed, too afraid of disappointing her mother further. But something had changed in Sophia during those months when Carmen stopped searching frantically. Sophia began feeling less pressure, less guilt, more space to heal genuinely instead of performing recovery for her mother's sake. The reunion was gradual, careful, real. Sophia moved back slowly, rebuilding trust step by step. Today, 5 years later, she's married with a daughter of her own. She and Carmen have a relationship deeper than ever before, because Carmen learned to love without possessing, and Sophia learned to be loved without performing. Carmen discovered that Anthony's greatest miracle wasn't bringing Sophia home. Anthony's greatest miracle was teaching Carmen how to love someone completely while releasing them entirely. What might you need to surrender to unlock Anthony's full power in your situation? What attachment might be limiting his options for helping you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes naming our attachments is the first step toward the freedom that allows miracles. But I want to address something that troubles many people who pray to St. Anthony. What happens when the miracle doesn't come? Some of you watching have prayed faithfully to Anthony for months or years without seeing the restoration you've requested. You've maintained hope when hope felt impossible. You've trusted when trust felt naive. You've persevered when perseverance felt pointless. And still, your loved one remains lost. Your situation remains impossible. Your heart remains broken. Does this mean Anthony isn't listening? That your faith isn't strong enough? That some causes truly are hopeless? Let me share a truth that might comfort you or might challenge everything you believe about how saints respond to human desperation. Sometimes Anthony's greatest act of love is protecting you from receiving exactly what you think you need. Sometimes the person you want restored would cause you greater damage if they returned unchanged. Sometimes the opportunity you're grieving would have led you away from your true calling. Sometimes the healing you're seeking would prevent deeper transformation that requires walking through suffering consciously. Anthony sees the entire story of your life from heaven's perspective. He knows not just what would make you happy temporarily, but what will serve your soul's ultimate purpose. This doesn't mean accepting abuse or abandoning hope. It means trusting that Anthony's love for you is so complete that he'll protect you even from your own desperate desires if those desires would ultimately harm you. Consider Rebecca's story. Rebecca prayed intensely for St. Anthony to help her husband overcome his gambling addiction and return to their family. She lit candles, attended novenas, made promises, begged heaven for this one miracle. For 2 years, Anthony seemed silent. Rebecca's husband continued gambling away their savings, lying about his whereabouts, choosing addiction over family responsibilities. Their marriage dissolved. Rebecca raised their 2 children alone while working 2 jobs. Rebecca felt abandoned by Anthony. She'd asked for one thing, her husband's recovery and return. It seemed like such a reasonable request. Why wouldn't a saint who specialized in restoring lost things help restore her lost marriage? 5 years later, Rebecca understood. During those years of single motherhood, Rebecca discovered strengths she'd never known she possessed. She learned to trust her own judgment instead of making excuses for someone else's destructive choices. She developed boundaries that protected her children from chaotic dysfunction. She built a life centered on stability and genuine love rather than drama and false hope. Meanwhile, her ex-husband's gambling addiction worsened. He lost subsequent jobs, accumulated massive debts, and became increasingly manipulative and desperate. The man who'd left their marriage was still recognizable. The man he became would have been dangerous to have around their children. Rebecca realized that Anthony had protected her family by allowing her marriage to end when it did, before her husband's addiction created circumstances that could have harmed or traumatized their children, before Rebecca's enabling patterns became so entrenched she couldn't escape them. Anthony hadn't abandoned Rebecca's prayer. He'd answered it differently than she'd requested, by helping her find the strength to build a healthy life without her husband, rather than trying to restore an unhealthy life with him. Today, Rebecca is remarried to a man who treats her with consistent kindness. Her children have stable home lives and healthy relationship models. Her ex-husband is still struggling with addiction, but he can't hurt her family anymore. Rebecca will tell you, Anthony saved her from the miracle she thought she needed, so he could give her the miracle she actually needed. This is perhaps Anthony's most difficult teaching. Sometimes love means allowing loss. Sometimes restoration means accepting that certain things should remain broken. Sometimes the miracle is finding peace without the specific outcome you've been demanding. How might this truth apply to your situation? What if Anthony's apparent silence is actually his most loving response to your request? Before we move toward our closing prayer time, I want you to do something that could change everything about how you experience hope during impossible circumstances. Look around your life right now for signs that Anthony is already working on your behalf, not necessarily in obvious ways, but in subtle preparations you might have overlooked. Has anyone mentioned opportunities you hadn't considered? Have you noticed inner strength you didn't know you possessed? Are there small improvements in your situation that you've dismissed as coincidence? Have unexpected helpers appeared just when you needed them most? Anthony rarely announces his interventions with dramatic fanfare. More often, he works through gentle guidance, unexpected encounters, growing inner peace, or gradual positive changes you might attribute to natural causes. Part of cooperating with Anthony's intercession involves training yourself to recognize his subtle influences before demanding obvious miracles. Take a moment right now and identify at least one sign that Anthony might already be responding to your prayers. Share what you find in the comments, because learning to see Anthony's hidden work helps develop the spiritual vision that notices miracles everywhere. Now, as we prepare to close with prayer, I want to give you something practical you can do every day to strengthen your connection with St. Anthony and increase your receptivity to his help. Anthony is often depicted holding the child Jesus because of a mystical vision where the Christ child appeared to him. This image reveals something crucial about Anthony's intercession. He brings your needs directly to Jesus himself. When you pray to Anthony, picture him carrying your request like he carries the child Jesus, with tender care, complete devotion, and absolute confidence that divine love will respond. Hold your lost relationship with tenderness instead of desperation. Carry your financial struggles with trust instead of anxiety. Embrace your health challenges with surrender instead of resistance. Cradle your broken dreams with love instead of bitterness. When you hold your problems the way Anthony holds Jesus, with reverence, patience, and deep faith, you begin participating in the very intercession you're requesting. Your lost cause becomes sacred when you treat it as sacred. Your impossible situation becomes pregnant with possibility when you nurture it with hope instead of strangling it with fear. This is Anthony's secret. He doesn't just pray for miracles. He creates the inner conditions that allow miracles to manifest. Now, before we pray together, I need you to know something that could change how you understand your entire relationship with St. Anthony. Anthony doesn't just help you recover lost things. Anthony helps you become the kind of person who doesn't lose essential things in the first place. Through his intercession, you develop spiritual wisdom that recognizes what truly matters. You cultivate inner stability that can't be shaken by external circumstances. You discover resources within yourself that no economic crisis can touch, no relationship ending can destroy, no health challenge can eliminate. Anthony's ultimate gift isn't giving you back what you've lost. Anthony's ultimate gift is helping you find treasures within yourself that can never be lost, faith that survives disappointment, love that transcends rejection, hope that endures delay, peace that remains steady through any storm. Your breakthrough is not only possible, but probable when you combine persistent prayer with active effort and unwavering trust in God's goodness. St. Anthony stands ready to intercede for you, and heaven is eager to demonstrate God's love through supernatural provision. Keep praying, keep believing, and keep watching for the miracle that has your name on it. Until we meet again in our next prayer journey, may God's richest blessings surround you and His abundant provision sustain you. Remember, your faith today becomes tomorrow's testimony. Someone is waiting to hear how God came through for you. Don't disappoint them by giving up too soon. Go in peace, work with diligence, pray with expectation, and watch God move mountains on your behalf. St. Anthony of Padua is praying with you and for you. Victory belongs to you in Jesus' name. Amen.